Imagine surviving nuclear war only to see your campus become a battlefield over canned food and Radaway. That's what happened at Morgantown. A college town turned into a feudalistic nightmare where students killed one another and death was slowly creeping in. Prior to the bombs dropping, Morgantown was an example of what a small college town should look like. Businesses thrived, people were happy, and the town was abuzz with energy brought in by the students that walked the halls of Vault-Tec University. These were the young men and women destined to be overseers and save future generations of America. Between the fraternities and coursework, the students had bright futures ahead of them. That is, until October 23, 2077. All of those bright futures were stopped in an instant by bombs falling, brilliant flashes of light, and nuclear fallout spreading over the world they used to know. It's hard to fathom the fear, panic, confusion, and despair felt by the young adults of Vault-Tec University, some as young as 17 years old with their whole lives ahead of them. The surviving students took shelter throughout the town, many hiding within the walls of their school. But supplies ran short, and within a few weeks, the students started to come out of hiding to find supplies and were met with Chief Mayfield. Mayfield was the police chief before the bombs fell. He felt it was his duty to maintain order in Morgantown by any means necessary. Right after the Great War, he enacted a strict curfew, used force to keep people from looting, and even shot at students looking for the basic supplies to survive. Within the first year, Mayfield lost control of Morgantown and the city descended into tribal warfare over 4 key things: food, water, shelter, and Radaway. If you could offer these to people, they would flock to your side for protection, and you, in return, could control them. It didn't take long for early gangs to start to form. Students in the Overseer training program were first to gain some influence over the town. After all, they were trained to be leaders in the post-apocalyptic world. Then there were the fraternities, who started to pull in supplies and influence, and eventually absorbed smaller fraternities, creating a larger community of student survivors. These new gangs, called houses by students to keep them from sounding too uncivilized, not only offered safety in numbers, they began to claim territory and were ready to protect it. But that didn't mean that students weren't still dying by the dozens during the first year. Hunger, thirst, and radiation claimed many young lives. Supplies were growing more scarce, and nothing was more important than Radaway. In fact, it's what caused the first student death from a fellow student. A small stash of Radaway was discovered in a pharmacy, and 2 groups of students fought over who it belonged to. After a verbal argument, 2 students reached for their guns and fired. One walked away from the pharmacy, Radaway in hand, the other didn't. From that day forward, it was open season. From the many early houses that formed, 2 main factions grew to be the largest in town. The first was the Street House, which occupied a walled area outside of Vault-Tec University. They had the advantage of easier access to supplies in Morgantown, and controlled the flow of supplies into the area by controlling the roads into and out of town. However, radiation particles tend to settle lower to the ground, so students of the streets were more susceptible to radiation poisoning, not to mention attacks from their rivals, the Roof House. Many students decided that living above the others in Morgantown was a better idea, and used the monorail system to move around the city quickly and easily while maintaining the high ground, an advantage they would exploit when fighting the Street House over supplies. This group called themselves the Roof House. They were less susceptible to radiation, though they were not completely safe from its terrible effects. And gathering supplies was tough for them as they had to fight their rivals to loot stores and houses in Morgantown. As supplies ran ever more scarce, the Great Student War fell into full swing. The Roof House was a constant threat to those below them. They were better armed and would often initiate small skirmishes with the Street House, taking whatever supplies they could in order to survive. The Street House, on the other hand, tried to starve out the Roof House and plan night raids on them. For example, a Street House student led a group of freshmen in a raid against the Roof House, using a fire escape to attempt to gain access to their territory. The Roof House students had covered the fire escape in oil, And when the students of the streets were climbing, they lit the oil on fire, killing several students. With all of this fighting, you might assume that one of the houses finally wiped out the other. But the real killer was a creeping death both houses felt the effects from. Radiation poisoning was the main concern for all who survived those early years after the bombs. Even areas that were not directly hit with a nuke, the fallout from the catastrophic events on October 23, 2077, left the world in a haze of radiation that spread. Students of both houses recorded incidents and side effects caused by radiation. 10 students of the roof house died overnight, while others mentioned that their hair and skin were falling off even when gently touched. This invisible rot is what ultimately doomed the students and survivors of Morgantown. Maybe Vault-Tec University succeeded after all. The students learned exactly what Vault-Tec wanted them to learn: how to survive at the expense of everyone else. When the bombs finally fell, survival became more important than humanity. To this day, you can still find remnants of the two great houses of Morgantown roaming the streets and monorail tracks, growling and biting, and in a way, still protecting their territory from those who step foot in their domain.